Last week, if we would have put guys like Sean Tucker, Kenneth Gainwell, Devin Singletary, basically all these third string running backs on the boom list, we've just smashed it. So who can we put this week?
I'm thinking we get guys like Isaiah Davis, George Alani, and how about Jerome Ford of the Browns?
That works for me. All right, well, look, we can't predict these random games, and we're not going to go that far. Let's look at some players we feel really confident about could go off in week 12. Well, one thing we know for sure, if you hit that subscribe button, it will help us out a great deal. We're on the way to 100K. We're trying to get there this season. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, take a second and do so. Start with a name that seems pretty obvious. Most weeks you're starting Derrick Henry, but not everybody is just, automatically putting him in that starting lineup because it hasn't quite been like last year. League winner Derrick Henry, number one running back most weeks. It's been a little up and down. It's been a little discouraging for the most part, but I think we have to just rewind a little bit. You remember after week 2 or 3 when people were trading away, selling low on Derrick Henry, thinking about dropping Derrick Henry, wondering if he was done. That was foolish, and this is why. You have to keep in mind, Derrick Henry is not human, right? Let's keep this in mind. Derrick Henry will continue to be a league-winning running back every season until he decides to retire. But look, realistically, remember, Cooper Rush was the quarterback those couple of weeks. The Ravens were losing. They had a rough schedule early in the season. And you know what? Derrick Henry cannot be his most effective. Like most running backs out here who aren't prolific pass catching backs, they just can't do it on their own when they're playing from behind. And the Ravens, their season has completely changed after losing 5 of their first 6 games, believe it or not. 3 straight wins because Lamar Jackson has returned. And since that time, we've seen Derrick Henry return to being an RB1 every week. Over the last 3 games that they've won, he's averaging 99 yards per game. Some people still feel like, well, where's that massive game like what we had back in week 1? Where's that 2-3 touchdown game? Look, he can't do that every week, but if there's a week he's going to do it, it's probably this week.
It probably is this week, and this is usually where I dive into the matchup stats and tell you look at how bad the Jets' run defense is. But you know what? I don't even have those kind of stats for you this week. This just feels like a Derrick Henry week because you look at it right now, the Ravens have the 3rd highest team total of the week. Not to mention they are 13.5-point favorites at home. This is a Derrick Henry game, right? This is a game where they're easily going to win against the Jets. It's going to be the 4th quarter. They're going to be feeding Derrick Henry the ball 10, 15 times against a tired, terrible Jets defense, and he's just going to be rolling on over. Remember, they traded away arguably the best defensive lineman, at least as far as interior defensive lineman goes, in Quinnen Williams, which has just made this run defense even worse. They just allowed a monster game to Travion Henderson last week. This is a Derrick Henry week. This is why Derrick Henry was built. He was born for moments like this to just destroy the will of a team in the 4th quarter and just relentlessly run them over and over again. That's what's going to happen this week. And look, the last time we had Derrick Henry on the booms, and it's been a long time since we put him on the booms, he scored 2 touchdowns that week. We took his touchdown line on underdog. It easily hit. Let's do it again. I'm going to take his touchdown line on underdog. Going to go higher than half a touchdown, basically. He's going to score at least 1, probably 2 again this week. You pair that with the new customer special. That's a way to get a win right off the bat. Not to mention, as soon as you play just $5 on underdog, they're going to give you $100 in bonus cash, win or lose. That's to go along with the 50% deposit match up to $1,000 that you get when you sign up using promo code ENDGAME. Go try underdog right now. Take Derrick Henry to score a touchdown, pair it with that new customer special, and collect your winnings.
You just mentioned Travion Henderson. All right, he had the pleasure of facing the Jets last week. Doesn't get that privilege this week. Gets to face the Bengals. Arguably even worse than the Jets, at least defensively we know they are. So you might say, well, this seems pretty obvious. Why wouldn't you start Travion Henderson? But guess what? Ramondre Stevenson looks like he may be on the way back to spoil the party because Henderson had this backfield to himself the last couple of weeks. And the other thing is, look, it's fair, it's reasonable, in fact, to be a little bit skeptical because Henderson, although obviously he's done pretty well, most of his fantasy production has been touchdowns, right? I mean, 3 touchdowns last week alone. He's got 5 total over the last 2 games. But we know that Mondre, being the bigger back, being the experienced back, he's probably going to be a guy who gets touches near the goal line. Is this going to steal Henderson's thunder completely? Well, the answer we think is no. Even if Mondre does come back, I think this defense is so epically bad, there's room for both of them to feast, but it's still going to be Henderson, isn't it?
I think it's got to be Henderson. I mean, he's just looked too good the last 2 weeks. You got to think that they're going to, I mean, I don't think he's going to be a complete workhorse here, but I think he's going to get most of the touches. And this is a great spot. Like you said, I mean, the Bengals are allowing the most yards and the third highest yards per carry to running backs. Not to mention they're allowing the third most receptions, the second most receiving yards, and the most receiving touchdowns to running backs. And if there's an area that favors Henderson, it's definitely in the receiving game. So even if Ramondre is, splitting early down work, which I think Henderson will still get more of that, Henderson could absolutely dominate just as a receiver. And the knock on Henderson lately, like you said, I mean, yeah, okay, all his production comes from touchdowns and big plays. But isn't that what we want in fantasy? Why are we complaining about this? We want guys that can rip off long runs and score touchdowns. And not only that, the Bengals allow the 10th highest explosive run percentage, so he could certainly be the guy that rips off the long run, catches the passes, still has a chance to score a touchdown. I know people are, I'm shocked at how nervous people are about Ramondre coming back. I'm not nervous at all. I think Trayvon Henderson is going to go off against this Bengals defense.
Now, on the other side, we have a receiver who has been, the opposite, kind of solid, consistent, but not really explosive. We haven't had as many big plays or touchdowns. That's surprisingly Chris Olave. In fact, that's what we thought about him the first couple of seasons when he played, is this guy who will be boom bust, right? Make those deep plays, right? Have a long touchdown or nothing, just didn't get that target share, didn't get that consistency going. And now this year, it's been a ton of targets. In fact, still, after this bye week, he still ranks 5th in total targets in the NFL. He's 11th in targets per route run. He's always out there. And so, look, he's been getting the volume, but 4 touchdowns, that's okay. But, that alone is making him a fantasy stud. And so you wonder, right? He's good, but not great. How can this guy boom? He's still on the Saints, right? Let's face it. It's Saints. You got Tyler Shuck there, quarterback. I'll tell you what. I mean, you should feel good about Olave already. I think Tyler Shuck might be a little bit of a pleasant surprise here. Look, so far, just in his first couple of NFL starts, he hasn't been bad. Just his second start with the Saints, he completed 70% of his passes. He did not turn the ball over. And in his first 2 starts, he's only been sacked 3 times. This has been an upgrade over Spencer Rattler. But Olave, he still hasn't come through with a huge performance. This week feels like it could be that week.
Yeah, going up against this Falcons defense, that is what has happened to this Falcons defense. Over the last 4 weeks, they're allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers, but over that stretch, they're also allowing the highest yards per target to receivers and the most touchdowns to receivers. Again, that's what we need for our booms, right? We need a touchdown here. Not only that, the Falcons play the most single high of any defense in the NFL. They're in single high coverage almost 70% of the time. This year against single high, Chris Olave has a 0.31 targets per out run, 2.57 yards per out run, and he's tied for 11th among all wide receivers in fantasy points per out run against single high. This feels like a matchup coming out of the bye against this Falcons defense that has just been reeling lately. We're down. What's also nice here is we're down to, it's just Chris Olave, Juwan Johnson are clearly the top 2 pass catchers in this offense now. They don't spread the ball around. This is a great spot for Chris Olave to boom this week.
A team that has started to spread the ball around a little bit more is the Chicago Bears. And that's why we've seen, ever since their bye, Rome Odunze went from one of the top receivers, a very high-end wide receiver too, for the first month of the season, to basically a roller coaster ride. Every week, it's basically boom or bust. We don't know what we're getting. I mean, we've seen just over the past few weeks, again, since the bye, not only the Bears trying to establish the run and doing it, they're actually able to run the ball, which they didn't do at all the first few games. So since that bye week, week 6 in PPR, here's how Rome Odunze has ranked on a weekly basis. Wide receiver 64, then wide receiver 63, wide receiver 8, then wide receiver 98, which technically he's tied for last because remember he had 0 catches that game. Then wide receiver 8 and then wide receiver 54. Now, that's not a strict pattern, but you think, okay, he sucked last week, he'll be good this week, right? It's not that simple, but on the other hand, He should be very good this week because it's a great matchup. And keep in mind, look, Rome Odunze, when he gets targeted, he's been highly efficient. He's right now 15th in terms of yards per reception, 15.3 yards per catch here. That gives him a high ceiling when he actually gets the chance to get targeted. And at 1.94 yards per route run, just behind Chris Olave, who I mentioned, and Devontae Adams. This is a really good receiver who just doesn't always get as many targets as he deserves. I think he'll get him this week, and I think you agree.
I do agree, because you talked about it. Okay, remember 2 weeks ago when you mentioned it, when he finished as a wide receiver 8, that was versus the Giants. I put him on the booms that week. I said, look, Giants play the most man, a ton of single high. These are the covered shells that Rome Odunze dominates. Well, now he gets the Steelers, who play the 6th most man and the 4th most single high. This year versus man and single high coverage, Rome Odunze ranks 9th among all wide receivers in fantasy points per route run. And he's got a 0.32 targets per route run, 2.98 yards per route run, and a 34% first read percentage. This feels like a boom game. And despite the fact that, the Steelers did a good job on Jamar Chase, I don't know if it was as much the Steelers and Jalen Ramsey as it was Joe Flacco, but whatever the case, they did not give up a big game to Jamar Chase. They're still allowing the 2nd most fantasy points to wide receivers lined up on the outside. This feels like one of those weeks. Yeah, you talk about it. He's been very boom bust. This feels like one of those boom weeks where he finishes as a top 10 wide receiver again.
All right, no, we don't always put a quarterback on the boom list, but sometimes something sticks out with a guy who's not an obvious must start. We don't talk about the must starts here. A guy who's been good and now looks like he's in a smash spot. Look, most of the season, Matt Stafford has been really good. And, before we even talk about this week, let's just take a second to appreciate how good he's actually been. Remember how a lot of people just didn't want to draft him, didn't even think about him because of that back issue. Said, oh, great, there goes the Rams offense, there goes Puka's value. So Matt Stafford has decided that this year, at the age of 37, he's going to have possibly his best season ever. And this is not an exaggeration. So far this year, he's got 27 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. In fact, he hasn't thrown a pick since week 2. All right. And he's been getting by through being massively efficient. This offense, of course, is clicking on cylinders. He's on pace for his best season since 2021, which, if you remember 2021, that's the year that the Rams won the Super Bowl with Matt Stafford. Okay. And now I don't know if he'll get to that touchdown total of 41, but he might. He's not that far off the way he's been playing. So why would you even doubt Matt Stafford? Well, he did have a down game last week, only 130 yards, and the yardage hasn't really been there. In fact, he hasn't had a 300-yard passing game since week 5. He's been getting by on that touchdown volume, and touchdowns, of course, come and go. They're never guaranteed. So why would we like him so much this week against Tampa Bay?
Well, a few reasons here. Number one, Tampa Bay is a team that you throw the football on. They're allowing the 4th highest pass rate over expectation on the season and the 6th most fantasy points to QBs. But you talk about the yardage here. Yeah, Matthew Stafford throwing a ton of touchdowns. And look, we're going to take, we keep talking about it, right? We're going to take touchdowns. Touchdowns are a good thing in fantasy football. We like touchdowns. Since week 5, the Bucs have allowed at least 260 passing yards in all but one game. That was the Saints game when they benched Spencer Rattler at halftime, and they've allowed over 300 yards in half of those games. So it could be a week where he not only delivers, a multiple touchdown game like he's been doing most weeks this year, but also gives us a high yardage game. And remember, they are at home this week with the 4th highest team total. So they're going to be playing in the comfy confines of SoFi. No issues here with weather or anything. This should absolutely be a great Matthew Stafford week.
All right, it's time to dig a little bit deeper. We each have a running back, a veteran who you would have thought going into the season would have been in your lineup every week. And this year, you barely even wanted to start them. So this really represents a big change. At week 12, we're saying these guys are going to go off. And look, I'll be honest, your pick really surprises me because you have not at all been on Alvin Kamara this year.
No, I haven't, but I think you got to be in on Alvin Kamara this week, again, against the Falcons. Before the team's bye, before the Saints' bye, we saw the kind of usage we really wanted to see from Alvin Kamara this year and had not seen. He was 10th among all running backs in expected fantasy points back in week 10 before the bye, played 64% of the snaps, handled 60% of the attempts, ran almost half of the team's routes, had a very strong 10% target share. That is what we expect from Alvin Kamara mostly. And now he also gets this Falcons defense. I talked about it with Olave. They've also been terrible against running backs. They are the 4th worst against the run on the entire season, but over the last 4 games, they're 2nd worst behind only the Bengals. But they've been especially bad against running backs in the receiving game. They've allowed the 4th most receptions, the 2nd most receiving yards to running backs over the last month. And according to Fantasy Points data, who did this research on the season, they're tied with the Patriots for the highest percentage of targets that go to the running back position. So, meaning teams throw to the running back more against the Patriots and the Falcons than against any other defense. That's what we've been missing from Alvin Kamara. So we're looking at a week here where he should dominate the team, the touches as far as the carries go. He should be involved heavily as a pass catcher. And the Saints are actually favored in this game with Kirk Cousins playing. So, I mean, look, if he gets game scripted out, he should catch passes. But I don't even think he's going to get game scripted out here. I think Alvin Kamara coming out of the bye is going to boom against this now terrible Falcons defense.
Well, running back that we both liked a lot heading into the season, really thought Kenneth Walker would just go off in the Seattle offense. We didn't realize that Clint Kubiak had decided he was going to have a 2-man committee all season long and basically ignore all the efficiency stats and, all the stuff that's happening on the field, and, just put his head down and say, yeah, you guys just both do the same thing. Well, look, I don't know. I can't explain why. Will this change? We're hearing some rumblings, they're saying Kenneth Walker's earned more opportunity. Like, what, just now all of a sudden you realize this? Okay, so I'm not going to bite too much into that necessarily, but we have started to slowly see it turn around. Look, Walker has done exactly what he's always done and shown that he's a good runner, right? So far, he's averaging 4.5 yards per carry on the season. He's 4th in missed tackles forced. He's always among the leaders in forcing missed tackles there. Nothing has changed except that he's seeing his workload being eaten into by Zach Charbonnet, especially around the goal line. And that is what is so aggravating. Is like, even if he's churning out yards, then he gets pulled and he's not scoring. And of course, as we keep saying here, that you need touchdowns for some really elite fantasy value, right? And so you can't get pulled at the goal line. But what we've seen over the last 3 weeks, now it's Walker who's gotten 2/3 of the carries inside the 5-yard line, maybe representing a slight shift here. And Walker, of course, has been held back by not getting as many carries. He should get plenty of carries this week because not only has he proven that he's more efficient than Zach Charbonnet, it's a smash spot for him against Tennessee. Yes, we fully expect Seattle to not only bounce back big after last week against the Rams, but just to roll over the Titans, because who doesn't roll over the Titans here? Game script should obviously work in their favor. They should be able to run it a ton. Kenneth Walker has not gotten as many carries as we would like, and that's why, look, since week 5, he hasn't even reached 70 yards. He's only got a 100-yard game on the season. This might be the game, but also, now I actually have hope he could score a touchdown because they're giving him that opportunity like he just scored last week. And so this is a defense we know in Tennessee. It's not very good. Nothing's good in Tennessee. They allow 4.7 yards per carry to running backs, but over the last month, they're averaging over 5 yards per carry allowed to the defense. Jeffrey Simmons, their interior defensive lineman, their best player, has been banged up, missed some time, been questionable with a hamstring injury. And look, this is a spot, if Kenneth Walker is finally going to have one of those games, this feels like it. Don't forget, we already got start-sit advice at every position for you. I'm going to help you win in Week 12, make the playoffs, and then keep it going. Don't forget, everything that you need to know is going to be in this playlist.